a reminder that you are muted, but hopefully, oh good, I see that you can hear me now. That you are muted, but you can text your questions in the chat box. All right, good morning. We're going to get started. So again, my name is Erin Matthews-Thomas. I'm the Senior Program Officer at the Potomac Health Foundation. And thank you so much for joining the How to Apply workshop today. And more than that, thank you for your flexibility and understanding as far as the changing format. Obviously, with the ever-changing status of the coronavirus, we wanted to make sure that everyone stayed safe. So I'm also joined by my colleagues, Susie Lee, who's the Executive Director of the Potomac Health Foundation, and Kukwa Osei-Gyamfi, who is our Program Assistant here at the Potomac Health Foundation. So we're going to just go through the agenda as far as what the day looks like for us or the morning looks like for us. I'm not going to keep you here that long. So next slide. So with the introductions and objectives, those will be the first points that we will talk about this morning. Next, we will go through the formal proposal overview and instructions. Then there'll be an introduction to fondant. Most of you obviously have already gone through that process with the letter of intent process. And then even for those who are continuing and participating in this workshop. So Cooper will be going through a demo to help those go have a better understanding of what will be required when you're doing the formal proposal. Then there will be an overview of logic models, budgets, other useful tools, and questions and answer. There won't be a break today because we are not meeting in person, and as far as the working session and our Potomac Health staff office hours, but please feel free to continue to reach out to us. We're more than willing to meet and talk rather on the phone or even doing a video conference if you have additional questions. Next slide, please. So the objectives today are just having a better understanding of the Potomac Health Foundation's just the formal proposal application requirements, obviously how to submit your application through fondant, as well as to articulate the objective of your grant program in a concise statement, to identify what components are necessary to meet your program objective through the completion of the logic model, and to have a better understanding how to develop a line item budget for your grant program. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to turn it over to Susie.
Hi, I'm seeing in the chat box that the slides are not moving. So we should be on the Potomac Health Foundation Strategic Plan 2017 to 2020 slide. Can folks mention in the chat box if, okay, it looks like we're still on the first slide.
Okay, hold on one second.
Okay, some are seeing it. Okay, it looks like there's a mix. I'm seeing it. Okay, and there, yeah, a lot of folks are saying they do see the right slide. Okay. Okay, if you are not able to see the slide, can you send, let's see. It looks like it's only a couple people who are not seeing the slides on the right thing. Cooper, do you have a version of this as a PDF? And for those, if you don't see the slide, then maybe we can send that out to you right now, and you can move along on your own. I'm not sure how else to deal with this since it doesn't look like it's everyone. So
okay. Yeah, I don't have it right now, but okay. I will just have to grab my other laptop because I don't think I can switch my screen.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Hold on 1 second.
Excuse me, I see the question about whether individuals would sign out and sign back in and whether that would help. Again, if you're willing to do that, that would be great. And yes, we're currently working on sending those slides out, the slide deck as well.
Actually, if you, since Kuklus is manning the slides, I think probably what's best is, Aaron, while I do my portion, if you could, if folks need the slides, maybe email Aaron. And Aaron, can you PDF the PowerPoint and then send it out to the folks who need it? But please send an email to Aaron if you can't see it. Does that make sense? Aaron, can you do that?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, someone just said logging off and back in helped.
Oh, great.
Okay. Okay. All right. Gotcha. Okay, looks like that's what is working for folks. Okay. Thanks, everyone. All right, so let's go ahead and move on then. Thank you. Okay. Hi, well, this is Susie. I'm Susie Lee. I'm Executive Director of Potomac Health Foundation. Aaron, thanks for getting us started. And I also just wanted to share my thanks and gratitude that everyone is able to maintain flexibility. And I had sent a note out also saying that, we are also being very flexible in this time and understand that folks are facing some challenges and resource constraints. So if there is anything around the application process in terms of dates or issues, the foundation and staff is all working remotely. So please contact us if you need accommodations. We've already heard from several people, and we also just want to, know what's going on with you all, and if there's anything we can be of assistance, please let us know. We just want everyone to be safe and healthy and all that during this time. So I just wanted to provide some context on our work at Potomac Health Foundation. We are in the last year of our 2017 to 2020 strategic plan, and our focus areas for the strategic plan are access to healthcare, mental health, and capacity building, which are the three overlapping circles that you see on this slide. And the way that we came to the strategic plan was just an assessment of community needs assessments and what was going on in the community, and came up with these with the information here and settled on these three areas. And so as we're entering the final year, I just wanted to emphasize again, this will likely be a one-year funding opportunity, and so these areas were the focus, or are the focus through the end of 2020. And so these are the programmatic areas of focus for Potomac Health Foundation. I think you see the arrow that runs below the three overlapping circles, and these are the mechanisms through which we address our focus areas. Obviously, grant making is the bread and butter of what the foundation does. We make about $5 million in grants per year in Eastern Prince William County, North Stafford, and Southern Fairfax County. And so most of the time of the staff is spent on the mechanics of the grant making, issuing the RFP, reviewing the proposals, monitoring through site visits and reports. And we work very closely with our grant committee and our board of directors to do that. The other thing that we have been putting more resources into over the 2017 to 2020 period is putting together convenings and organizing convenings. Some of the examples of convenings that we've done are a leadership learning series on racism and health equity. We've done a number of lunch and learns and convenings of our health safety net partners on Medicaid expansion. We were leading the coordination of a legislative breakfast in partnership with the Community Healthcare Coalition of Greater Prince William with our recently elected Prince William delegation for the state delegation that just completed General Assembly. And the last thing that we have really put our efforts into is the provision of a number of technical assistance opportunities, which we've been doing through our capacity building window, which we can talk about if you're interested in some of those opportunities. Those are not just open to Potomac Health Foundation grantee partners, but also to nonprofit organizations as well. So if you have questions about that, if you're a new organization that is not that familiar with Potomac Health Foundation, I think a number of you already have access to services like Catch a Fire, our workshop series with catalogs for philanthropy. And if you aren't familiar with those, then I would encourage you to reach out to Erin about that. Could we get the next slide, please? So we have one cycle per year for our Howard L. Greenhouse Large Grant Program. And this is a year that runs from July 1 to June 30th. The grant year runs from July 1 to June 30th. And we usually get that process started, as you know, towards the end of December. In January is when the letters of intent are due. So we do our grant making one time per year for this Howard L. Greenhouse Large Grant Program. And this is our main grant making cycle, and it is generally project-based support. We do support general operating support through this grant as well. We also, as an aside, have a health safety net grant window, but that's an invitation-only grant opportunity for organizations that provide direct clinical services. So examples are our federally qualified health center in the community, a free clinic, mobile van, those organizations that provide direct services. But for this window, I think, and of interest to you is the Howard L. Greenhouse Large Grant Program. And so the focus area for this cycle is determined on an annual basis, and it is approved by the board, usually at their December meeting before the request for proposal is released. And you are familiar with this because you are now passed through the letter of intent cycle and are moving on to the formal proposal phase and have been invited to submit a formal proposal. And this was, and these are the focus areas, as you are familiar with, for the 2020 to 2021 cycle. We have access, under the Access to Health, we're taking proposals for Medicaid expansion, improving access to health care and social determinants of health. And under capacity building, we welcomed proposals around individual organizational needs and those projects that are not duplicative of the programs that are currently being offered by our capacity building partners. Could we have the next slide, please? So for the formal proposal, there's information that we are requesting for in the formal proposal, and the slide shows the components that are required. These are outlined more in depth and more in detail in the instructions that came with the invitation to submit for a formal proposal. And so we're asking for your agency information, program narrative, a monitoring and evaluation section, your budget, and some accompanying documents. And again, there's more information and details about character length. And so you will have more room in the formal proposal. I know that we had a lot of feedback about the letter of intent character limits were short. And so you will have more information to flesh those things out in the formal proposal phase. And I know that many of you, most of you have gotten emails asking to set up some time to talk with us, and so a lot of those have been scheduled. If you have not scheduled those yet, or if you would just like to get feedback from the staff, we want to help you make your formal proposal stronger. And so please reach out to us and schedule some time, because we did have a lot of feedback from the letters of intent that we thought would make your formal proposal stronger for when they're presented to the board and in that decision-making process. And so after this, as you know, This will be done through Fondant, which is our grant management system. Kukla is really the lead and the Fondant expert in our house. And so after I think my portion, she'll be doing a demo in the session today. And you can also reach out to her if you need assistance individually. After her demo, we will do an in-depth session on monitoring, evaluation, and the budget, which, as you know, we normally do this in person so that it's usually a bit more interactive and you know, we can provide feedback to you. And as we've been saying, if you would like more assistance and some one-on-one help, please definitely contact us. So the next slide is accompanying documents. And so these are some of the documents that we request the first time that you put in a formal proposal or a first time you put in a for a new project. And so just going off the slide, there are a number of human resources and governance documents that we request as part of your formal proposal to show collaboration with other entities or you know, buy-in from community members. We do request 2 support letters, and then there are a number of financial documents that we also request. Please note that we actually do not request 990 anymore. Fondant, as we have set up, we have a connection to GuideStar, which is now Candid, and we're able to do checks through, like a fiscal check through that, so you do not need to submit that. So I will now hand it off to Kukla, who will go over important dates for the process.
Thank you, Susie, and thanks everyone for being accommodating for our new way we're doing how to apply, at least for this year. So some of the important dates that we have here, of course, is when your proposals and applications are due. This is the magic date that you guys should definitely put in your calendar, April 13th, 2020. The applications are due by 5 p.m. And of course, because of the situation with COVID-19, if we need to make any changes, we will definitely communicate that with you guys ahead of time. Also for the month of April, we would like to conduct some site visits, but also with COVID, just let us know if you guys feel comfortable with us coming in, and of course, we'll make those accommodations as well. On June 5th, we will be contacting applicants based on the board meeting, what has been approved and what has been denied. So be on the lookout for that. On the 25th of June, if things are better, we'll definitely have an orientation event. So please mark this on your calendars. With the orientation event, it's a chance for you guys to come out and meet your fellow cohort, share your project ideas, and definitely have time to network. So we love to make our grant payments by July 1st. So between the time that you guys get your notification if you've been approved for the grant and July 1st, we will be sending out cooperative agreements, and also if you're a new grantee, an ACH payment /form. Also, if you're an old grantee and you guys have changed your banking information, just please let me know so that we can send out that information to you guys so that we can be sure that your payment gets to you guys on time. On October 14th, we will be having a celebration event. Hopefully by that time, the world has gone back to normal. Usually with the celebration, invite our first-year grantees and along with our last cohort of grantees to come in and, you know, talk about their successes. And we typically have like awards that we give out, and it's a really nice event. So hopefully you guys will be able to make it and we'll still be able to have it. December 2nd, we usually have our holiday happy hour. Drinks are always on us, food is on us, so be sure when the time comes that you guys are definitely signing up so that we can have an accurate number when the time comes. January 11th is also another magic date. That's when your interim reports are due. So please have those turned in by that date. And then, of course, like Susie said, this grant period goes from July 1 to June 30th. So our grant dates end on July 30th of 2021, and the annual report is due on the 12th of July. So I'm going to switch screens. So hopefully you guys will be able to see my screen when I switch over to fondant. So please hold for like 2 seconds. Are you guys able to see my fondant page? Okay, I'm getting a bunch of yeses and nos. Okay, so this is fun. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to stop sharing and reshare, and let's see if that works. Okay, do you guys see it now? Okay. All right, guys, hold on 1 second. Let's see how I can do this.
Well, it looks like some people are going to try to log off and back on again. We apologize for the little hiccups with our system right now. So there was a question whether or not you're supposed to see the screen share. Yes, Kukla is at the login screen for Fondant. Kukla, I'm wondering if you log in, if people, since they're just seeing a white screen, if you log in, perhaps they'll be able to see.
Okay, let me see. I mean, if they're getting a white screen, I'm thinking there's something. Some people see the login, some people don't.
Okay, it seems as though some people are saying they logged back in. Okay, so logging off and logging back in. Again, we apologize that you're having to do this, but it looks as though that's kind of what's working.
Okay, are you guys able to see it now?
Yeah, Cougar, I think you should just move ahead. Okay, sure. and then if folks are needing help with fondant, then I would just suggest reaching out to Kukla to get some assistance with that. And so the demo won't be too long. And yeah. Okay. Well, it looks like logging back in and out helps. So thanks, everyone.
Let's see. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to proxy in as Megan Clay. Are you on? Is that okay with you? Because I know you have 2 different grants in the process. She was on. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Megan. So, 2 seconds. So this is our screen, and this is how things look like on our end.
Hey, Kukla, there was a request to speak a little louder, so you speak a little louder. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Can anybody hear me? Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, cool. So for the people that applied for funding through the 2020-2021 Howard L. Greenhouse LOI process, this is the screen that you guys will get when you guys log in. So prior to the email that I sent out changing the way we access the application, you will no longer need to use the password for to access your application. So really all you do is when you log in, you see the process, you'll see the name of your project. You'll see the name of your project, and then you'll see the process 2020, 2021, Potomac Health Foundation, Howard L. Greenhouse Large Grant Program. You'll be able to view your LOI, and you'll also be able to edit your application. So once you're able to do that, you'll get access to the application directly. So please do not use a password to apply. So this is it. So we also, when we sent out the approval email, we sent you guys a document that had the directions for the application. The application, that document and this application go hand in hand. You'll be able to put your agency information, make sure you're answering the required questions. You see that the character counts on the document also matches the character counts that are here in the actual application. From this point, everything is pretty much straightforward. We do have sections where you have to upload some documents, and there are times where people have a hard time due to application size. From the past, what has worked best for people that have had issues with document size is just taking a PDF version and reducing it so that you're able to upload the file. Other than that, the formal proposal section of this is pretty straightforward. Is there any questions on that?
No, I don't see any questions in chat box.
Awesome. Do we upload? Hold on 1 second. Yes, you do upload both, but as you can see, the logic model is not a required upload, but it would be nice if you do have a version that you would like for us to see to put in with your application. But we do ask for the required, the parts of the logic model in the actual questions.
Yeah, and I would suggest that you do upload both, even though that's not required. Generally, we recommend when you do the application to kind of write it in a separate Word document just so that you know the character count and you're kind of not stuck in the form, and then you can copy and paste over. That's generally what you have done.
Sure.
And then it looks like there's another question about can we choose the type of logic model we want. Actually, we're about to go into the monitoring evaluation section. There's a logic model template that we provide that Erin is about to go over.
So any other questions? So with the formal proposal, for the continuation application, you want to go, let's start from the home screen just so that everybody can be on the same page. On the top of the home screen next to the Potomac Health Foundation logo, there's a house, which is your home screen, and then there's an apply button. You want to click on the apply button, and at the top, you want to, you see all my passwords, you want to click on the access code to enter that specific application. This one is for the continuation application. So once you put in the code, this is the screen that pops up. Once you click apply, you will have access to that specific application, and that applies for the continuation application folks. And basically it's the same thing. The form that we sent out in the email directly correlates with this application, including all the character counts and some of the questions are a little different from the formal proposal, but of course, following that form will help you input that information to this application. Okay, I see a question. Okay, Susie answered it. Great. Does anybody have any questions about how to access the continuation application?
Yeah, and the question in the chat box for those of you who prefer hearing versus reading, there's a question around, for bios and qualifications of key staff, do you prefer those in resume format or more of a narrative overview of qualifications? And either is fine. There's another question about, can we choose the type of logic model we want? And we do have a logic model template that Erin is about to go over. Did I say that already? I probably did. Okay, sorry about that.
Sure. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Megan. It made my job a little easier. Okay, I'm gonna, hopefully this is seamless. Are you all able to see the PowerPoint slide again?
Okay, it looks like the same folks are not able to see. I'm really sorry, but can you log in and log out? Because that seems to be what is kind of every time the screen share goes. I think that probably makes sense. So right now we're at the PowerPoint slide that says Fondant Demo. Kuku, can you advance to the next slide? Because I think that's Erin's. Okay, yeah.
I'll give people a couple of minutes to log back in for a minute. Okay, there's now the monitoring evaluation slide that's up, and there's actually 2 cartoons that are on. If you're able to see the slides and you log back out, if you could just indicate in the chat box that you can see those now. Okay, great. It seems like everyone is able to see the screen. So these cartoons are examples of how not to think of monitoring and evaluation. You know, oftentimes when I'm thinking about monitoring and evaluation, it's essentially the work that you're already doing, but make sure you're capturing it in a way and quantifying the great work that you're doing. So when thinking about monitoring and evaluation, it's more or less looking at it at the front end as an integral part of your project design. Is a way to help you critically think about what's needed to make your project successful. Because again, we know this great work that you're doing. And so why are we looking for you to articulate the success? Is with nonprofits are in a different position, right, than non-for-profit business, which to oversimplify, looking at the bottom line. So for nonprofits, looking at what is this impact on the community and making a difference, and also accountability to funders and supporters and community. So monitoring evaluation gives you the tool to be able to do that. And so we're going to talk about that as one of the main tools in monitoring and evaluation. Next slide, please. Okay. So logic model is a systematic and visual representation of the relationships among the resources you have to operate your program. the activities you plan, and the changes or results you hope to achieve during your grant process. And so it should be used as a tool to help strengthen project design, implementation, and evaluation. And it's also called a logic framework or log frame. What you submit now is what you will be reporting against. So it's important to get this robust and solid kind of flushed out now, because you'll be tracking it from that start date of July 1 until the end of the grant period, and also be reporting against that in your interim reports that would be due in January. So now with looking at the logic model, looking at the resources, inputs, and activities, those are the plan work that you'll be doing. And then the output, outcomes, process, and impact are the intended results and objectives. Next slide, please. Okay, so we are going to start with the program objectives, and what do you want to achieve with the program? Okay, next slide, please. All right, it looks like some people are saying it's a little low. Can you hear me better now? Can everyone hear me okay?
Erin, I think just move forward. It's only a couple
Okay.
of people, and I'm sending people messages privately, and I haven't heard back. So yeah, I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and I would just encourage, like, check the volume on your computer. I know the sound quality is not always the best, but
Okay.
maybe, yeah, and then, or folks might want to change the audio input. So if you want to try using the phone option instead of the computer option, please try to troubleshoot on your end as well.
Okay. So here, when we're looking at the program objective and how we want to articulate what it is that you're working towards, with a program objective, looking at a statement of a specific and quantifiable accomplishment to be attained in a given time frame. So including words like increase, strengthen, decrease, extend. Also, some of you may have worked under SMART goals or SMART framework, as far as SMART standing for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. Okay. Next slide, please. So example of a program objective would be to increase healthcare access for adults in Dumfries by assisting individuals with Medicaid enrollment. And so kind of going back to the previous slide, when looking at those words as far as you're increasing, so again, a specific quantifiable accomplishment, and you're looking to increase, again, that word, healthcare access, and then specifically adults in Dumfries. So again, tying it all together and very specific as far as what it is that you're trying to do. All right, next slide. So now, before we start in on the logic model, let's talk about indicators and target, which is the format in which we're going to fill out the columns in the logic model. Okay. Next slide. Thank you. So with an indicator, a variable that helps measure changes in health situation and assesses the extent to which the objective and targets of a program are being attained. And so this is usually expressed as percentages, rates, or ratios, but not a value themselves. And this will be a little clearer once we give some examples. Okay, next slide, please. So long-term change in population health status. So when you fill out a logic model, you usually start, if you could go back one, there you go, thank you. So when you fill out a logic model, you usually start at this big picture population level, and then you work backwards. So impact is this big picture, long-term change in a population health status. And then obviously working your way back, and we'll talk about as far as those outcomes, process, outputs, activities, and then the resources and input. Okay, next slide, please. So here are some examples as far as that impact, that big picture that we're looking at. They're obviously far down the results chain, very difficult to measure what extent our program can contribute to the health status change, but it's important to keep this long-term big picture approach. So I'll read some of these examples. By 2021, the percentage of cost-burdened households in Virginia, more than 30% of monthly income spent on housing costs, decreases from 31.4 to 29%. So again, you see that it ties to a specific percentage, again, a larger approach to looking at what it is that you're trying, as far as your program trying to drive towards. Another one example is Virginia's Black infant mortality rate equals the white infant mortality rate. Obviously, that's very big picture, not something that's going to happen probably during your grant period. However, the work that you're doing, obviously long-term, could potentially impact that particular rate. And then the percentage of Virginia adults who are overweight or obese decreasing from 64.7% to 63%. So again, these are some examples to be able to look at, how you're targeting. You can also search your specific program area. So there may be some national or global programs and efforts addressing the same issue. This also helps us think about our work on a continuum and not thinking it more of like siloed. And obviously looking at local data, looking at state data, and helping you tie to that bigger picture as well. Next slide, thank you. All right, so now we're going to go towards the part of the logic model where we're more directly linked about how your program can specifically project the work that you're doing, specific outputs and outcomes, and addressing your program objectives. So we're going to talk about the outputs and outcomes and how these are defined. And you'll see this within our, yes?
There's a question actually that I just caught. The impact area is where you use indicators or targets?
So we have that as indicators, or do you want to go back to that slide? Okay, go back again. It's so it's something that can be used interchangeably. So the impact areas, the question is where you use indicators or targets. So it is an area that you're measuring the changes in a health situation to the extent to which objective or target of program are being obtained. So yes, the impact area is where you're looking at that at a big picture. But I'm going to continue on to kind of show how that flows with the logic model.
Yeah, and Erin, can I jump in here? This is Susie. And
sure.
So actually all of the columns, so we want impact, we want indicators and targets for all of the areas. So that does include impact as well as that, what Erin will go over with the outputs and outcomes. It is helpful to see both, to have what indicators you will use and then the target for that indicator. And I think, as Erin said, the impact piece, we don't expect that your one program will make those large picture changes, but it is good to keep that big picture scope in mind. And so that's where that's why we ask you to consider that, because your program is one in a continuum of things that are trying to address that impact point. But the things that we actually will be tracking mostly are the outputs and outcomes, which is what Erin is going to go into now.
Thank you, Susie.
And there have been several times people have asked, we are going to send out the slides for the presentation, and it's being recorded. I think we've said this like 4 times now. So just to repeat, we will be sending out the slides, and we are recording this webinar.
Okay, so now with the outputs and outcomes, just to give you a definition of both. So when looking at outputs, this is a direct and measurable product of a program, your program's activities and service. So it's often expressed in terms of a volume or units delivered, and then an outcome being the changes in behavior, attitudes, knowledge, health status for individuals or populations as a result of your program. So I'm going to go in a little bit more and provide just some examples of an output versus an outcome. So here's this example of which is an output and which is an outcome. So when looking at the training, participants have increased knowledge about nutrition and fitness. And then looking at individuals and target community, complete participation in nutrition and fitness workshops. So when there's no change with the output, then it's a direct product of your intervention. So individuals in a target community population in nutrition and fitness, as far as the product, but then obviously with the output as far as the increase with training participants' knowledge about nutrition and fitness. So there's a change in behavior as far as the increased knowledge about nutrition and fitness, and it's not a direct result, but a change occurred as a result of the intervention. Okay. If you have questions, feel free to put it in the chat box.
Yeah, Erin, I think another way that folks will sometimes talk about outputs versus outcomes is that outputs is like you can count, it's almost like counting nuts and bolts, like you can count how many people have participated, you can count how many workshops have been conducted, you can count how many clients or consumers have come through the door, and then the outcomes, it's a bit harder to measure because you need to measure the change in behavior or health, but the outputs are, sort of counting nuts and bolts or things that have been produced. I've heard that as well.
Yes, no, that's helpful, thank you. So then the next slide, go ahead. Is that Susie?
No, it's me. It's Kukla. So Mike asked if increasing in knowledge equals an outcome.
Yes. To answer that question, yes. So then the next slide gives some numbers, which maybe help as far as a little bit clearer as far as outputs rather and outcomes using indicators and targets. So when individuals identifying rather outputs and outcomes using indicators and targets. So here's some examples. So a number of dental care providers recruited to donate appointments for uninsured patients. So the target equals 10. Whereas a percentage of training participants having improved knowledge about nutrition and fitness, and then that target percentage is 80%. The next bullet shows percentage of birth weights that is normal, and the target being 90%.
So actually, Erin, can you go back to that last slide, because I think this addresses a question that came out earlier about what we want to see in the logic model. So when you fill out your logic model and you have those columns, that one column is outputs, one column is outcomes, one is impact indicator, this is what your filled out logic model will look like. So if say you are doing a dental program and the way that you want to measure it is counting how many dental providers are recruited to donate appointments, and you have a target of 10 dental providers. This first bullet is what you would input into the logic model, and then the same, and then the second and third bullet, those are outcomes, right? Because it's a change in behavior or a change in health status, and so that's what will be in the outcome column. I might have given something away, but so I think So anyway, I think that's important because someone had asked that question earlier, and I think usually there's like 2 to 5 indicators and targets for each column. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, that was helpful. Thank you, Susan.
Okay.
And I think too, when you see the template, and as Susie's saying, as far as what it is that you're supposed to, put within the logic model, we're happy to walk you through that process because, again, normally this is a bit more interactive. When we do it in person, that we're able to kind of step aside, let you, we often ask you to bring your letter of intent application or your continuation application information with you to kind of help you think about how you would fill out the logic model and what would be outputs, outcomes, and then these indicators and targets. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so next that we're going to talk about the means of variation and how you're going to measure. Next slide. So what we're looking for here as far as means of verification, so sources of information, proof of results, example. So, the slides prior were asking about those targets and indicators as far as numbers and percentage that we want, that you are expected to reach in your project. So showing that example, staff reports, focus groups, pre and post tests, government statistics, again, this means a verification of what sources of information are you using in order to show proofs of results. Okay, next slide, please. All right. So here with processes and activities, so what are the key activities to be carried out and what sequence or order to produce the expected results, which would be your outputs and outcomes. So examples could be hiring staff, convening focus groups, developing curriculum, various outreach, meeting with community partners to spread the word about your services. So again, what are these processes and activities that you plan to do throughout the process, which at the end would be able to, have this work towards the impact. And so again, oftentimes those activities is the work that you're doing and then making sure you're putting it in the steps and sequence. So first, that obviously convening that focus group, you won't have those numbers right away, so you have to have these activities in order to work through the process for the outputs and outcomes. Okay, next slide. Kind of talked about this a little, I'm kind of ahead of myself, but with project activities, just making a list of these project activities. So what are the key activities to be carried out and in what sequence? I kind of talked about that already. And then 2, do all the planned activities move towards the project purpose? And so if not, question if it's a necessary activity or just busy work. If it's something that's already built into the process, is it something to say, for example, if you're convening a focus group, is it necessary to build in there or to state within your model that you're also going to be reaching out to community partners that you work with? Obviously, that would be very big, right, in order to convene a focus group. But if it's something as far as listing in there, and with that, I'm going to call X amount of community partners, perhaps that's not something you need to list in there because maybe that already, again, is kind of already baked into what it is to reach out to those community partners to convene a particular focus group. And not only that, I think this last bullet too, does everyone associated with the project understand these planned activities, and making sure that internal staff or your partners that you may be working with, that everyone has a greater understanding of what the activities are and the sequence is for those particular activities and why they need to maybe go in that particular order. And so a tip down here as far as monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. So monthly, annually, and donor reports should be included in your activity schedule. And again, once you see that logic model, it will kind of help you work through, obviously, that time frame as well. So inputs, human or other resources needed to achieve the project objectives. So again, important to include that as far as your staff, vehicles, office space, computers, training materials, medications. Obviously, what are those resources that are needed for you to be able to achieve your final objectives and impact that you would have, and making sure that you list that. Risk and assumptions. Okay, we can go, yes. So assumption is a precondition that needs to exist if a project is to be successful. Typically, these conditions are outside the agency's control. So think about the likelihood of whether these risks will take place. What are your working assumptions? You know, this is something for us, obviously, dealing with COVID-19, you know, some of our current grantees, obviously that's not something that we assume something like this would happen, but obviously recognizing that we have to maybe change things because of the current state that we're working in. And then the risk assumption, the process is determining factors that could endanger the success of the project. Likely, you know, there'll be overlap in each of these cells because they are interconnected, and what affects your impact will ultimately affect the process outcomes, outputs and outcomes, you know, and kind of even going back to the inputs as far as the human and resources aspect of things. Definitely not tying this, one person should not be in your organization should know kind of what the project is and what's happening with the project when thinking about, well, what would happen if that particular person would leave the project, and what impact and risk that could particularly have on the project. And also thinking about other risk mitigation strategies are, that could be useful down the road when you are reporting on your progress. Any questions? Okay, next slide. Okay, so that was just a very quick process as far as going over the logic model. But yes, when you walk through these various steps that you've completed the logic model, again, we are here as a resource. We know this was a quick overview, and again, we usually do it in a more interactive setting. So we're happy to be able to walk you through that process, so please reach out. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Susie, and she's going to talk about budget, money. Yes, exciting. All right, Susie.
Thanks, Erin. Okay, I will be going over the budget template, and it looks like there was a question about the logic model template, and it is in the grant application. Thank you, Shannon. So also in the application is the Potomac Health Foundation program budget form, and so I'm going to be giving kind of the contextual why we need a budget, the purpose of a budget, and then we will be going over the budget application, the budget form for Potomac Health Foundation specifically. And so I think all of you, because you have been working with programs and designing programs and such, a lot of this should be old hat for you. You know, why do we produce budgets? I think budgets are important because it helps us link finances to broad organizational goals and guide our decision making. and it ensures that we have adequate resources to implement our planned activities. We can use budgets in order to communicate plans to various stakeholders like a funder or a donor. And the budget also, in a way, it's its own launch model because we can use it to assess performance and make adjustments and encourage accountability. So the budget really can tell a story just like a proposal narrative or a launch model does, but we're using numbers instead of words. Next slide, please. So for example, if you have a budget will have you'll have your overall budget. So say your grant is for $50,000, but that $50,000 is broken up by line items. And so the budget may include a $1,000 expense for training materials. And the explanation in the budget narrative says that each workbook is $20 each. So when a funder looks at that $1,000 expense, if you don't include that budget narrative saying that the workbook is $20 each, $20 per workbook, then when you're looking at the budget, you don't really know what that $1,000 is for. And so we can tell by, if you include the assumption for how you came up with that $1,000 expense, we can know that the project plans to reach 500 beneficiaries through the education program. And so that's why it's important to include the narrative and the assumptions, which is also in the budget form. And so the budget can really tell a story around that. Next slide, please. And another budget story, 40% of the total dollars will go towards training materials. And so you have the budget line items, and you see that 40% of the money is going towards supplies or training materials. And so what do you know about the project and the budget? It's likely focused on educational goals. It's likely some kind of health education or prevention training or something in that wheelhouse. I just wanted to pause here and say that, when you are divvying up the budget, how you divvy up the budget is important. You want to include all the expenses that that will go into having a successful program and making sure that you have enough resources to do the work. And there's one more budget story. Next slide, please. Okay, so say you have budgeted a certain dollar amount for fuel, and at the 6-month mark, no fuel expenses have been recorded. At the same time, the travel ground transportation category was 200% over the budget. There's a story behind what's going on and what is happening with the project. Well, the vehicle was broken and staff were being reimbursed for utilization of public transportation. And so we include this slide because sometimes you have this great budget and you have a great idea of how much you're going to be spending, and you have planned this down to a detail, and then something happens. A vehicle breaks down. We have a pandemic of COVID-19, and so then you're having to adjust, and those dollars that you want to originally spend on a certain line item, you're realizing, okay, we have to scramble and change that to something else. And so actually the foundation, when you put in the budget for us, this is the proposed budget, and we approve that budget for the grant year from July 1 to June 30th. Over the course of the year, you are allowed to shift dollars between line items up to 10% of the whole budget. So if you have a 25, I'm going to make it an even number so I can do the numbers in my head. So say you have a $100,000 budget, up to 10%. So $10,000 of that, you can change between lines. And so say that you've, put $50,000 towards personnel, you could spend up to $60,000, or you can move $10,000 of that towards the other line. Up to 10%, you do not need to come to us. And I know I'm skipping a bit ahead, kind of assuming that, you've got the proposal approved and your budget's been approved and you're in the grant cycle. I think the important thing to know is that you can have an approved budget and a set budget, but we know that there is going to sometimes be some line shifting based on things that have changed over the course of the year. And the piece of, so the other piece of that is that if it is over 10%, then we do ask for a budget modification. I think everything that's going on right now, we've sent a note out to everyone letting you know that, we are maintaining flexibility. We still want to know what's going on. I think anytime there's changes to a budget or a program plan, if there's changes to major staff, we just ask that you keep us informed. I mean, everyone, Erin and I both have worked on the other side of the table where we've requested funds, and so we understand that things change in program design and program implementation. So I think the important thing is to know that there's an open door. We'd rather you over-communicate about what's going on rather than being surprised at the interim report phase or the final report phase that, hey, the program has completely changed, and if you haven't been letting us know, so that can take us aback sometimes. So just, I think, keeping that open communications that there might be budget changes or expense changes, and just to give us a heads up. Okay, so next slide, and this is where actually I think it would be helpful for you if you have it next to you, or if you want to look at it, is to look at the Potomac Health Foundation program budget template itself, because we're going to be kind of going through that sheet. So the first kind of section that we have on top of the program budget sheet, there's actually three, actually maybe I should go over, there's three pieces of the program budget sheet. The first page is the budget itself, and that's what we're going to be going over in the next few minutes, where you have all the different line items. And then the next page is the budget signatory page, which is just a sign off to assure that the budget has been reviewed by your senior staff and it's been authorized. And then the third page is the budget narrative, which before I had mentioned the assumptions and how you came up with the numbers. That's where you're going to be writing in the narrative and the explanation. And so the program personnel is the first section of the budget sheet. So you'll see in the sheet that there are two numbers columns. So one is the PHF request from Potomac Health Foundation, and then the second column is the budget, the total budget for that line item. And I think that it's important to note, and I know we kind of say it over and over again, the foundation cannot be the sole funder of a project. And so that total budget cost, the total cost, if you look at the bottom of the sheet, is that the total cost and the total budget column should be greater than the Potomac Health Foundation request cost. There needs to be some in-kind or other cash support that's going towards the request. And so that total budget on the right-hand side, that's going to be the total budget for each of the line items, and then what you're requesting specifically from the foundation will go in that middle column. And so when you fill out the program personnel, please list the personnel associated with the project, and you probably better to use titles and not individual names, and you want to determine the monthly gross salary of the project personnel, and then calculate that as an annual figure, and then include that into the request. Can we have the next slide, please?
Sure, there's a question.
Sure.
A couple of questions. Do we include cost payroll liabilities, taxes, Social Security, etc.?
Yeah, that should all be in the personnel benefits section.
And then the other question is there a percent of total budget that needs to come from other sources?
No, we don't define the percent total budget that needs to come from other sources. And we would, include in-kind costs. We haven't set like it has to be a certain cost share. So no, there's not a set amount on that. Okay, so going into actually perfect for the next slide, you want to estimate the monthly payroll tax expenses and other monthly expenses, and that will be under the personnel benefits section. And so, we strongly encourage you to provide benefits for your employees, and the foundation will, look at those costs, and we do look at things like cost of living adjustment for year to year. That's not totally applicable to this because it's a 1 year, first year grant, but we do pay for general operating costs. We do pay for benefits, and so this is where you would include that section, which I think answers that question that was just typed into the chat box. Okay, could we go to the next slide? Okay, so then the next on the budget sheet, the next kind of group of costs, it includes occupancy costs. This would be, and so, the slides say estimate the monthly cost. This is an annual budget, and so we would recommend that you include the monthly cost in the narrative, and then that's so we can figure out the assumptions that went into calculating the annual cost. So like I said, the foundation, we do not pay for, or we will not fund like a indirect line, like a percentage of the budget. I know that a lot of organizations have that. What we ask that you do is that you break those costs down and just cost them out as line items in the budget. And so this might include office equipment and supplies, telephone, wireless or internet access, rents, and utilities, et cetera. I think there's a question that came out. Sorry, I don't think I understand this question. In kind and other income towards match. Can it be duplicated for match in another grant, or must it be used only for Potomac Health Foundation grant? Kuko, can you unmute Barb so she can explain? Is it possible for you to unmute her?
Yeah, hold on 1 second.
Okay. Sorry, I don't understand that question.
Okay, Barb, you're unmuted.
Hi, Barb.
Barb,
Are you there? I don't have a micro. Oh, there you go. It says she doesn't have a microphone. Well, so I guess the question is kind of, can you double count it? Can it be duplicated? Yeah, Barb, can you just give us a call offline, because I'm not sure. I don't understand the question. I mean, if you're require the match used for that grant is not used for. Okay. Federal grants require that the match you use for that grant is not used for any other grant. Okay, yeah, let's take this question offline because it sounds like it's pretty specific to that. Okay. Okay, so then the next question around, the next section we have is around supplies and equipment. And so this is pretty straightforward. If there's any kind of physical things that you need to complete the planned activities, we find that most of the grants that we give are largely personnel costs. So program salary, personnel, or sometimes consultants. Supplies and equipment, though, of course, sometimes there's training materials that are needed, equipment purchase. We do capital grants. I can't remember off the top of my, I think there are actually several capital grants that came out in this letter of intent section. So that's, I think, supplies and equipment is where you would put those. So if I think there were a couple of requests around vehicles or, big capital costs and equipment and construction materials, that this is where you would put that line. So this is the section for any capital costs. The next slide, please. And again, with all of these, we are asking that in the program budget narrative, you're just explaining, you'll see that the lines match up, and so there's a section for you to go ahead and put in the narrative explanation for your budget costs, or each of your budget line items. And so the last section on here is sort of a catch-all. Any other direct program expenses that could include promotional marketing costs. That being said, I just want to put in a plug here for Catch-A-Fire. If you're not already part of Catch-A-Fire with us, then A lot of these costs you could get done on a volunteer basis through Tetrafire if there's any kind of marketing or logo development, that type of thing. So, we would encourage you to kind of think about some of the resources that Potomac Health Foundation already has and use those instead of asking for it in the grant or budgeting for it in your project grant. So in this section, you would have line items such as subcontractor services or consultants that you might be using, any monitoring and evaluation costs or data services that you need, or other types of direct program expenses. So that's really the last section in the budget. So, and then this next slide we have really, and I think I had mentioned this before actually, this is where you kind of calculate the assumption. So the assumptions are, when I say assumptions, I'm talking about like the base cost. So like a book that you need for your training class costs $100, then you would put in $100 times however many participants. If a monthly, there's a monthly fee, then you would calculate that out for 12 months. And so this is where we ask that the detail gets fleshed out in the budget narrative template. Okay, good. Next slide, please. Okay. So under the program revenue detail, so if you look at the budget template form, the left side is really all your expenses. And then the right side, the second half, the second side or the right side of the form is around the program revenue detail. So understood that a lot of you, because you're applying for a grant from Potomac Health Foundation, a lot of the revenue will be coming from Potomac Health Foundation. And so in this section is where we want to see what other revenue you have from other sources. And so the total revenue should match, so on the very last cell that says total revenue on the bottom right-hand corner should match the total budget cost of the program, because if you're doing the program, then the revenue should match the cost or the expenditures. If you have the program, if there's any program generated, for example, you're charging a fee or there's a membership fee that will be going towards the program, this is that first section where it says program generated. If there are other grants and contracts for that, this is where that second section is where you would fill out what other dollars are going through. And then same with the public support and then there's a last section for in-kind donations. So that's like staff time that you're already committed towards that, be it in kind. And then the status here is if it's requested, promised, meaning that it's been committed but not yet received, or secured, which means the funds have been received, then that's just we would ask that you fill in that middle column that says status. And so the amounts are all there, and then you would list those. And then at the bottom, you'll see Potomac Health Foundation. And that entry, that cell is the grant amount that you're requesting. So that Potomac Health Foundation revenue side should match the column that has the Potomac Health Foundation expenditures and request total cost side. So hopefully that's pretty straightforward. We still get several budget forms every year that doesn't seem to line up with that. So if you have any questions about that, definitely let us know. And then there's a link there that kind of gives a guidance on how to calculate in-kind services. Okay, next slide, please. And then we don't actually have a slide for the program budget signatory page. I know not sometimes the CEO is the program staff, so you might have a duplicate signature. And if you have a board, basically some folks are saying it's hard to get a board member, like if you're a big academic institution or a large entity, then it's basically someone who has financial oversight and can sign off on budget and expenditures. That's the level of signature we want to receive on that one. And then for other tools, we just wanted to let you know, in the past, in person, we've given out other tools such as a Gantt chart or a budget planning tool. We're not providing those in case there's some confusion because these are not required. But if you do want additional resources or tools to help you say in your program, we have those available. So feel free to reach out if you have additional questions on that. So that actually is the last slide we have for the budget template. And I know this is we budget in for about a half-hour time for kind of questions and more interactive component to the How to Apply workshop. Obviously, we were not able to do that today, so we're able to kind of keep it a bit shorter. And I see that so we're moving into the Q&A section. So Kuku, if you could advance to the next slide, and I see that there is a question in the box about explaining Catch-A-Fire a little more. And Erin, do you mind if I pass off to you since you are the Catch-A-Fire contact? That would be great.
Okay, not a problem. So what Catch-A-Fire is, it's a partnership that Potomac Health Foundation has with the organization, which provides online digital support with skilled volunteers. And so something that we found, as Susie mentioned, we work with Catalog for Philanthropy, and they provide in-person capacity building workshops. But we understand that everyone may not have that ability to meet in person. So this allows for you, if you have questions around your strategic plan, that you could set up a call or even a longer-term project with a skilled volunteer. These volunteers are vetted through Catch-A-Fire. They have years of experience. You're able to interview these skilled volunteers, and they're able to work on projects as a strategic plan, any leadership training potentially, or board education. They can help you with this. And again, in translation, which was something that we started hearing from some of our grant partners, that you can set up a 1-hour call with this skilled volunteer or set up a short-term project. And again, the foundation, we are covering the cost of this. This is free to our grantees and community partners. So if you currently don't have access to that now, please feel free to reach out to me offline, and we can talk about potentially getting you set up if your organization is not already a part of Catch-A-Fire.
And Erin, is there like a slideshow that we had done earlier on? Maybe we can just send that out to the group when we send out the slides as well.
Okay, perfect. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, were there any other questions? Go ahead and feel free to put those in the, okay, there's another one. In the application, I see the headings for the logic model. Is there also a document for us to download, like the logic model document you showed when you explained it? Yes, there's. I think the logic model template is included in the instructions or in the fondants as well. Okay, and then there's another question. I'm still not understanding the difference between the project objective and impact. Erin, do you want to take that one? Or do you want me to go for it?
You can go for it.
Okay, so the project objective is specifically the objective for your project. So yes, there can definitely be overlap between a lot of these things. So impact, outcomes, and objectives, because those are more long-term goals, those can have a lot of overlap. But the project objective is really specific to your project. And then the impact is kind of really the big, either county level, state level, national, global level impact that you are rolling your project up into. I'm not sure if that clarifies more. We're happy to go over that with you if you want to kind of give us a call and set up some time to talk. And Erin, do you want to take up the next one about, can you please go, or add, or can you please go over means of verification?
Sure. So with the means of verification, essentially we're looking for sources of information and looking at those proof of results. So how it is that you're measuring it. So sure, you're going to, say you're going to reach 10 people and improve their education on diabetes education and adherence. So examples of then how are you going to do that? Are you going to do that within a focus group, a pre and post test? Are you going to tie that to some government statistics? So that's what we're thinking of with means of verification.
And also some organizations have a database that they use, or they might use something to collect information, some social impact, software where they track clients, health records, electronic health records. So those are all things like means of verification.
And there's another question, as far as access to the Gantt chart and budget resource, please feel free to email me. This is Erin. It's just erin@potomachealthfoundation.org, and it should also be in your instructions. Feel free to reach out to me, and I can share that information.
Erin, do you want to take the next one about risks and assumptions, and I can do the financials one?
Sure. With the risk and assumptions, as far as us talking about those things that just may come up, and making sure to factor those things in, particularly when thinking about, again, I'll use obesity education and outreach as an example. Oftentimes that may be a little challenging as far as the startup. So making sure you're building that into your timeline and understanding that it may take a while if you currently don't have a relationship with a particular organization, that maybe the MOU is in place with a particular school that you're working with, but maybe it will take a little while for you to get those parents enrolled and make sure that you're getting your information out there as far as, if you're emailing, if it's flyers, that may take a while as far as getting that startup and to build that into your timeline. So you're not saying, okay, I'm going to start these workshops month one. I mean, that obviously it's going to take a while to start that. So start thinking about the work that you're trying to do and that specific objective maybe that you're working on, that what is that timeline, and then factoring in some outside factors that may impact that as far as your startup time.
Yeah, another example that we like to use as well is like if you're hiring a new project staff, it might take a while longer. The risk is that you would state the risk as something like, it is difficult to find qualified candidates, or you're assuming that that you're going to hire someone quickly. So, I mean, there are risks and assumptions for, it just will depend on your specific program. And then the next question is, we are a smaller organization, less than $500,000, that has not been required to do a formal audit. Are unaudited financials okay? Yes, that's fine.
Any other questions? Feel free to use the chat box. And again, as we've been saying throughout the presentation, don't hesitate. We appreciate, don't feel as though you're reaching out too much. We appreciate that, just giving us a heads up of kind of maybe some challenges you may be having in the process. So don't hesitate. I'm not seeing anyone else writing in the chat box. So I think that everyone is good to go. So again, the webinar has been recorded. We will be sending out the presentation slides. We will also be sending out information about Catch-A-Fire, and for those who are interested in some of those additional budget charts, we'll send those out as well. So thank you for your time, and definitely stay safe. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I just also want to say thank you to Kukla for managing the technology, and to all of you for bearing with us. Appreciate it.